Good afternoon. I've trained them on the third good afternoon is when they have to calm down. Good afternoon. Come on, a little more enthusiasm. Good afternoon. All right, that's much better. Welcome to Lunch with Books. My name is Sean. I'll be your host. If you haven't turned off your cell phone, I heard one go off over here somewhere. I'm not saying who it was. But if you wouldn't mind silencing those cell phones, kids, so we don't interrupt our guest. This Thursday, Travis Henline, remember Travis? He'll be back to tell us about Dunmore's War, but the indigenous struggle for independence. So that'll be the final class in our People's University series on Dunmore's War. And then next Tuesday, Elvis will be here. Yeah. Elvis Presley, yeah, the king, you know. He'll be here performing for you and telling you all about his life. So I don't know what to expect, but Elvis will be here. And he actually works at Marshall County Library. So did you know that? That's where he's been hiding all these years. And the week after that, on the 13th, Bonnie Thurston and Cheryl Denise with Mark Harshman for the Wheeling Poetry Series. And that's the 13th at noon. Today we have a young man who grew up in Steubenville, in part, but we'll let him tell you about his life. I don't want to give up too much, because we'll have a conversation with him. He holds a BA in philosophy from Miami University in Ohio, and an MFA from Columbia University. So, not bad. But the reason he's here today is he's written this book, which we have in our library, called Tropicalia. Am I pronouncing that correctly? And it's a novel, and it's set in Brazil, and he'll tell you all about that. His name is Harold Rogers, and here he is. Please welcome Harold Rogers.
Good evening. What is it? It's afternoon? What is it? Noon. Hey, I didn't know I was going to have to compete with Elvis, so. Okay, hey, I'm Harold, right? I grew up in Steubenville. I went to Catholic Central High School, but my mom is an immigrant from Brazil, and so I actually grew up spending a lot of time in Brazil. I was going back and forth between Steubenville and Rio de Janeiro. Two very different cities. Has anyone here ever been to Brazil? Okay, certain things. And you'll be over there. That sounds good. Yeah, but I wrote this novel. It's set in Rio, right? It's about a family who is Brazilian American in some ways, different than me. I think when I was writing this book, I was thinking, like, what would my life have been like if I grew up primarily in Brazil instead of primarily in Steubenville, right? I was educated in American schools, right? I speak English without an accent. And that just creates a lot of different opportunities for your life than if you grow up somewhere like Brazil, which is considered a third world country. It's a different place. So I was kind of trying to imagine like a counterfactual of my life. What would it have been like this? What opportunities wouldn't have been presented to me? So, the story is there's this brother and this sister who are in Rio, Daniel and Lucia, right? They're living with their grandparents. Their mother, a long time ago, their father is an American who never stuck around, right? He was an American, like, ambassador. He had some political connections, and he went and, he had children with her and sustained her life financially, but he was never around, right? He had another family in the United States, right? So eventually, their relationship fizzled apart, and she met another guy on the internet from Steubenville, and she went and married him and left the kids alone, right? She left them alone in Rio. And so their grandfather dies on Christmas. It's the last week of 2019. It's the week of Christmas, and he dies, and she decides she's going to come back to town, right? Come back to Rio for the first time in 6 years to see her kids. And, she comes back with her new husband, and things do not go well, right? It takes place during the New Year's holiday in Rio, which is a big big party on the beach, right? It's like everyone goes out and everyone's wearing white, and there's a million people on the beach to go see the fireworks. And, things happen. And I'll read a little bit of the book as I talk. This is the first chapter. And the style of the book is there's Portuguese words scattered throughout, right? Because it reflects my experience in some ways where Portuguese was always a part of my life. I'm fluent in Portuguese, right? I speak to my mother and my grandmother in Portuguese, and I speak English with my father, who doesn't speak any Portuguese, at all. So we can talk about him without him knowing. All right, so this is from the first chapter, and the chapters are written in different first-person perspectives, right? Daniel gets his first-person perspective, and he's a character most like me in age and temperament in a lot of ways, but his sister gets her perspective too. The grandparents get a chapter, the mother gets a chapter. So I'm writing from different voices, but this is from Daniel's first chapter. Call me Daniel, I was telling the American girls. Mateus met them this morning and asked me to pull up, thinking I needed a rebound after his cousin dumped me. So the four of us were out here chilling under the hard sun, the sun mean like it was trying to scorch us into order. The turista girls shining pretty, soaked in the day's slow progress. Our kiosk watched by the bronze-frozen gaze of Princesa Isabel, the statue the police were all posted under, cradling their machine guns like gifts for the people, sweeping the beach with their military stare. But how could you sweat that, with the pigeons all plopped weary on the calçadão cobblestones, with those malandra vultures circling their black spirals in the sky, with the kiosk cover band playing nice? Copacabana was bustling, and everyone crowded around to hear the band go into País Tropical, which is a famous song, right? Music, Brazilian music, is a big part of this book, and that's why the title is Tropicalia, right? Does that word mean anything to anyone here? Now, anyone like Brazilian music? Ever listen to any Brazilian music? Okay, we got one guy who's a Brazil enthusiast, and but we like samba. We've heard of samba. Right, okay, we got Bossa Nova. Do we know that? Okay, Girl from Ipanema. Do we know that song? Okay, we're getting somewhere. The book takes place in very close to Ipanema, where that song is set, with the Girl from Ipanema, right? So it's in Copacabana, which is like, wheeling to like Bridgeport or Martins Ferry, right? It's like neighboring places. But so Tropicalia is if samba and bossa nova were in like the 50s and 60s, Tropicalia is the next musical movement that came out of Brazil, and we got some famous singers like Gilberto Gil and Caetano Veloso, who are all legends in Brazil. But the whole movement was about making a Brazilian sound through various foreign influences, right? Like they were listening to a lot of American music and British music and trying to make a sound while still using all those influences. So I was trying to make a Brazilian-American book out of all my diverse influences, right? So that's why the title meant something to me. And the title also plays on the fact, Tropicalia, it's like this idea of Brazil as a tropical paradise, right, is what it plays on. So in the first chapter of the book, we get a lot of this tropical paradise thing. Everything's real pretty, right? And they're going to a famous tourist destination, Daniel and these tourist girls that he just met. And, everything looks good. And then, as they're at, it's called the Sugarloaf, right? There's another family there, and the kid falls off the hill, right? So I'll read a little of that part. And so we get little cracks in the tropical paradise atmosphere. Okay, so here they're on the top of the mountain, and this kid they saw down there is up there now. When the kid showed up, Rachel was taking pictures of Olivia, the two tourist girls. Me and Matilde were leaning against the rocks, chilling. I heard some rustling in the bamboo, and who else would it be but the German boy, looking at us like it was no problem he was invading the private space we'd made with our presence, like it was no problem he was altering our whole environment. No, he belonged here. No family trailing him, alone. He climbed out to the area adjacent to us where the rocks jutted out, dangerous and unstable. Kid being stubborn, precarious as hell. It was late and everything was getting dark. A big tree that grew from the abyss hung over us, draped in shadows, its mute branches twisted around like ominous warnings. We all stopped, watched him, tense, as if a snake had snuck up on us. And then his family showed up. His mom walked to the edge of the bamboo and started scolding him, motioning him to rejoin them. But he wouldn't even look at her. I heard stirring from the dark tree. And he'd been telling the girls that a bunch of monkeys are going to show up. These mikus is what they're called. I looked up, and it was a miku. Against the blood-red backdrop of the falling day, the sun crowning his head like a saint, climbing out on the branch, chirping, squeaking, real cute. I said, "Look," and a gasp arose from the gathered group. The father emerged carrying an H. Stern bag, which is this jewelry store that's up there. But as soon as he saw the monkey, he dropped the bag and pushed past his wife to get a picture. The monkey regal as the city on that high branch. And then, sprouting like fruit from within the tree, 6 or 7 of his subjects went to join their solitary king on the end of the branch, on the edge of the abyss. The whole court coming out to confront us like we had landed on their shores, unwelcome. They were nearest to the kid who was walking out closer and closer to the tree, closer to the abyss, close enough to where he could reach out and touch one. The air around us congealed into a thick, hot tension. He swung his backpack around and started digging through it, his movements the focus of our collective gaze. With a nefarious look, he pulled out a banana, the banana glowing golden in the sunlight, like a treasure for the mikus. They stopped chirping and stared. We were silent. I wondered if I had misjudged this kid, if he was about to offer some benefaction to the true residents of this mountain. But no. He started waving the banana around, taunting their attention, and then he faked threw it off the cliff as if he wanted the monkeys to jump for it and fall to their deaths. Those monkeys didn't budge. Instead, the kid lost his balance, stumbled, tried to catch himself, failed, and we all watched as he tumbled over the cliff, becoming a fading amplification of, ah. But the kid ends up okay, right? He doesn't die. And that's a fake. It's a fake out. The first chapter is a fake out. Eventually some people do die over the course of the book. But as you can see there, a lot of the book is about, sorry about that. A lot of the book is about who is justified in certain areas, right? Like the narrator there is talking about how the monkeys are the true residents of the mountain and these tourists are coming and they're invading the space. It's about who does the space really belong to? And I'm writing about it as someone who, that I'm not truly Brazilian, and I'm not truly American, right? I live in this liminal space. So a lot of the book is trying to figure out that question of how to belong when you don't belong into a set space, right? But I'll read a little more. Eventually, if you're wondering, the last chapter is in Steubenville, right? Because I had to throw that in there. The daughter, Lucia, who's a lot of the book is these characters trying to figure out how to be good too. They're trying to be good people. They're confused on how to be good. Like Daniel is especially confused. He thinks being good is cheating on his girlfriend and romping around with tourist girls and having fun. While Lucia, his sister, has to be home and she's responsible for their grandparents and their little cousin whose mother died. Right, so it's these balances of responsibility too. What's your responsibility to your family, to your country, things like that. But eventually, Lucia goes back to Steubenville to visit her mother. This is 7 years after the events of the book, so it's a little bit in the future too, right? But and she has a different perspective on Steubenville than I probably do. She's been living in Rio, and I think everything in her eyes has a negative glaze, right? Because her mom left her for this town, and her mom left her for an American to be American because she didn't want the kind of life Lucia was living, right? She wanted a different life. She wanted the opportunity of being American, right? The plane landed and the et ceteras proceeded until I was in a rental car on the highway with the windows down, sweating, surprised at the hot, arid Pennsylvanian winter. I finally got my license in Lisbon after a fraught process that would have been much easier if I wasn't a terrible driver. I didn't have a car, but sometimes I rented one so I could terrify Marta driving around, unintentionally reckless, lost on Portuguese day trips. Today, the road was wide open in front of me, and I was charged by that vaunted, mythic American freedom. I felt like a cowboy galloping past the dead, desiccated landscape, like I could slice forever through the cool, pure air. What I didn't know as I crossed the bridge border into Ohio and took an exit to John Scott Highway, then up a steep hill lined by bare trees looking shy without their leaves, was what I expected from my mother. The last time I saw her was when she sheltered Marta and me in her hotel room after the New Year's tragedy. And though I was numb from the skull-bashing events of the worst night of my life, she came through like an angel, shimmering white spread on the highest mountain peak of motherhood. And the next morning she was gone. I was fooled again, fooled twice. What if I came all the way here and she wasn't dying? What if it was just another ploy to undunce me? I entered Steubenville. It looked quaint, cars mosily drifting across the hilly, bucolic landscape, but the picturesque charm was cut through with tinges of terror. A rotted deer carcass on the side of the road that looked like a juddy, maggot-eaten mush, and a gun store positioned like a welcome sign advertising their Glock of the week. This was the town my mother left me for? Right, so then she goes, and her mother, her mother is dying, but Lucia, her mother has just kind of like been bad to her the whole time. She's came back acting like she wanted peace, but she really was just fooling her again. And Lucia is going back there, despite maybe what she really wants, to find a way to make peace with her mother before her mother dies. Right? The whole book is kind of about how to find peace and goodness, even when the people that keep hurting you are going to continue to hurt you. How to make peace with that fact, with the problems of your past, the depredations and the sins people have committed against you, right? Some people think I think the book's kind of funny, right? People think they'll tell me it's like dark or depressed. I don't like that. I had, oh my gosh, one guy reviewing it said that he canceled his trip to Brazil after reading the book. It's like, I put reality in the book. The book's about reality, right? There's some things in every city, in every town that maybe aren't the greatest things, right? But I love Rio despite all its problems. I love Steubenville despite all its problems. And I think that is kind of a guiding metaphor of the book, right? How to love something despite all the problems. How to love the people in your family despite all their problems and all the ways they're grievancing you. How to love the place where you live despite everything. Because I'm an optimist, right? I think there's a way to have love and hope, even if maybe you don't believe things are going to change, right? If things aren't going to get better and better, right? So I think that is a lot of the guiding purpose of the book. Maybe I'll read the last lines I don't care about spoilers. This is the last part of the book. So this is, okay. Lucia and her mother have been hanging out and finding some sort of cordiality, right? They maybe even they had a good time. After hours of drunk, gregarious reminiscing, we went to sleep, and I crawled into bed right next to her. It was my last night. I wasn't about to sleep on that bored, hard couch. The next morning, I woke before she did, and I tidied up the house, got my things together, and drove around until I found a store that was selling Steubenville sweatshirts, and I bought one as a souvenir for Marta. I stopped by Smokey's to see if my Brazilian buddy was working. Oh, that's a cameo I put in for myself in the book. I worked at Smokey's at this smoke shop in Steubenville, and I was in the book. But he was off, and so I left my contact information with another employee just in case. I don't know. I wanted some tether to my mother, to this podunk town. When I got back to the apartment, my mother was still in her room. I walked in and opened the curtains and flooded the room with light, but she didn't stir. So I pulled the covers off of her, and what I feared was true. Her eyes was closed, as if she was sleeping, but her lips were chapped and white, and she wasn't breathing. And when I grabbed her bone-cold hand to feel her pulse, there was nothing. She was dead. I called an ambulance and watched as she was body-bagged and removed, feeling far away from the fear and hatred that defined my relationship with her for most of my life. But I also felt like my duties as a daughter were complete. So whether she would be buried at a barren funeral or cremated, it wasn't my business. I had a flight to catch, and my story had an ending. So that night, wearing the gaudy shirt she gave me, I got on a plane and sat in the very last seat. And when I leaned my head against the window, I was overwhelmed by an ecstatic heartache for my mother and for Rio de Janeiro, but more than that, I was confounded and awestruck by the love that moves the sun and the other stars. And that's the end of the book. But there's a lot in the middle that's pretty good that you ought to check out. But yeah, so now I wrote this book, and now I live in New York now, and I'm a boxing coach there, right? I was a boxer at Miami University. I was a boxer, but I decided that writing was a lot easier than boxing, and so I decided to give that a try instead. But yeah, now the next book I got going on is about, it's my American version of this book. So that one's set in Steubenville. And I think, I'm going to continue writing, continue exploring the dynamic between those two places, right? Because that's really what I know. I feel like a very provincial person in the two places that I'm from. And so I think, and there's so much, just yesterday I was in the local library in Steubenville, and I was looking at the local history wing they have. And I'm just like almost, intimidated by how much history, like how much forgotten stuff there is, and even a little town like Steubenville that no one even thinks about, right? And just, I think as a writer, that's something I want to do, is mine that history, the interests in all these, my little localities, right? Because that's what I can do. That's what I have the authority to do, I feel like, is explore those things. So that's what I think I'm trying to do going forward. Anyone thinking about anything? Any question? Yes, I was in Brazil in the Olympics. And actually, we had the World Cup in 2014, and we had the Olympics in 2016. And when Rio, because the Olympics were in Rio, and the finals of the World Cup were in Rio, when Brazil got those events, right, we were in like an upswell. Our economy was booming. We had an extremely popular president, and everyone projected that Brazil was going to be one of the big central world economies in the coming decades. But then we had an enormous political scandal there that kind of crashed everything. And the crash of all that upswell of hope kind of coincided with the World Cup and the Olympics. Like, we had a big loss to Germany in the 2014 World Cup at home, where we lost 7-1. And that was kind of that was like a metaphorical destruction for what was actually happening to us in reality. So that, that's the Olympics. That's a relevant question, because that imbues the book, that feeling of Brazil as this hope, this defeated hope, right? Because I feel like that's a lot of Brazilian history, is these upswells of hope only to just come crashing down like that. And that's what the Olympics represented for us, I feel. Yeah, sure. Brazil is the only country in South America that speaks Portuguese. It's a different language than Spanish. There are I took Spanish in college and I got a D minus. So, so that'll tell you. Yes. Brazil is actually a lot like the United States. And, it's funny, like anything culturally or politically that happens in the United States happens in Brazil like 2 years later. Like, they are intertwined like that. Brazil has an interesting history. It's where the majority of the slaves in the Atlantic slave trade was in Brazil, and it was also the last country to abolish slavery. In 1888 was when they abolished slavery. Right, and there's always been this idea of Brazil as like a paradise of racial harmony too, and that in the imagination of a lot of American writers, that's how it was in the early 20th century. That Brazil was this paradise where races lived harmoniously, classes lived harmoniously. And that's not totally true, but I think that there is an aspect of truth to that. I mean, Brazil is like Rio de Janeiro is where I'm from. It's a beautiful city, right? I mean, it's not a bad place to live. The economy's not like it is in the United States, but it's a big, diverse country with lots of different. I mean, it's a huge country, and there's like 200 million people, so there's a wide variety of experiences. Um, yeah, we're probably on a downward trajectory in some ways, but it's a good country. Yeah. It is a large country. I think landmass, they're comparable. I mean, if you count Alaska, which like, that's the main part. I think it's a little bit bigger, but there's the whole Amazon forest, right? And so there's a lot of places where there's not a lot of population, but it's a big country. Anything else? Yeah. This was my first book. Well, I was a philosophy major in college, but I was always interested in literature, and I made plenty of attempts at writing. I mean, I have several books that I started and were horrible, and they're buried, thankfully. But this was published last year, and the paperback just came out a few weeks ago. Yeah, it's doing well. The reception has been good. Yeah. Anything else?
Harold, I'm the disembodied voice
Yeah.
from behind the curtain. I wanted to ask you, I know things about you that the audience doesn't know.
Yeah.
So, what's it like to be a stand-up comedian in New York?
I am a stand-up comedian in New York. Huh? Yeah. Well, yeah, you gotta be able to fight some people off. Well, that's always good to tell a crowd that I'm a boxer, so they don't get any ideas, right? No, but being a stand-up in New York is fun. It's a different muscle than writing. I mean, I spent 3 years writing this book, and basically nobody read it until last year, right? So it was a long process of delay, and where you got to think like, oh, is this really as good as I thought? Like, what is, it's really your judgments about the book that hold. But in stand-up, like, if I have an idea, I'll just say it to the crowd, and then I realize if it's bad or good right away. So it's different. It's a lot different. Well, okay, my mother first moved to Los Angeles, right? Which is, I mean, because in the Brazilian imagination, Steubenville doesn't really exist, right? It's not like that was her big dream. But she moved to Los Angeles and then Las Vegas, and she met my father, and my father's from Toronto, but, I guess she loved him, and, she loved him enough to move to Steubenville. I don't to tell you something. But that's how she ended up there. Yeah. I did jujitsu. Actually, Copacabana, where this book is set, the neighborhood, is like that is the capital of jujitsu, kind of. And MMA, like the UFC, like that was started in the beaches of Copacabana. People with different fighting disciplines would go and test out their disciplines against each other on the beach, and they would fight there. And eventually, the Gracie brothers, who are from Copacabana, came to the United States and put on the first UFC event. So UFC. UFC started in Copacabana, is what I say. Yeah, I go there every year usually. Yeah, I have plenty of family down there. My grandma's here now, but she lives primarily there, and I have a little cousin there, and I have plenty of family there that I visit. Does anyone want to go to Brazil more after this or less? Yeah. Well, I think that is one of the most fun things about writing fiction is trying to imagine what someone else's life is like. And you start with the things that, I mean, you can really get inside of anyone's head if you just like, where are, I'm sure we have the same feelings about, we have happiness, sadness, all these things. And then you slowly start to get into the particulars of their perspective and what's that like. And I mean, I have a twin sister. I spent a lot of time around women in my life. I think I got them down. New York will probably squeeze into it. I mean, the book is all fiction, but there's so much of my life experiences in there because that's just, I feel like that's the best way to make things up is to start with like something that's a little true, right? That's the most convincing way to make things up. I'm sure New York will find its way in there. I still feel like I'm a Brazilian American from Steubenville. That's New York. I like New York, but that's how I feel. Anything else? Yeah, I've been in New York. I moved there in 2019 to go to school, and yeah, the jobs as a comedian, it's tough. Like it's really your friends set you up with that. Is what I found in my experience. Sometimes you get something from social media. Social media is a big part of it. Now it's a lot different than writing. Like to publish this book, I went to Columbia, right? I did an MFA, and that I had a professor there who was a prominent writer, and she set me up with an agent, and then the agent sends it out to the editors, and it's a very like old-fashioned process. And stand-up now is the total opposite of that. There's no like structure really. It's kind of you have to make the opportunities yourself. So they're very different in a lot of ways, the writing and the stand-up. But yeah, that's why I got this writing thing. I got that. I teach the boxing, and I'm hustling. Unfortunately, all my physical copies, I didn't have any more on me. But you can get it on Amazon, and if there's a local bookstore, I don't know, is there? What are the bookstores like in Wheeling? Huh?
Books a Million.
Books a Million. I mean, yeah, they might have it there. They could definitely order it. I would always, instead of Amazon, support your local bookstore. I would recommend, right? The library got one. You guys can fight over that copy. I went to Portugal one time. Portugal. I mean, the Portuguese is totally different. It's more different than like British English to American English. Like they talk in a way. It's probably like listening to Scottish people speak English. That's kind of like how Portuguese is. It's a little disorienting. They sound kind of dumb talking it. Anything? You guys been in New York? Yeah. New York's like a foreign country, right? Yeah, that's yeah, it's a step up.
Harold, did you mention that you're working on a new book? I can't remember.
Yeah, it's almost finished, the new book.
What's it about?
It's about Steubenville. It's about a family in Steubenville. The Rogers family. She does. She spends a lot of time in Brazil. I think that's how my parents keep up a happy marriage. They spend a lot of time apart. And, yeah. 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 Well, that's a good question. Actually, my girlfriend is Brazilian. My girlfriend's Brazilian, so but she's Brazilian American like me, which I you know I'd like keeping that up. I want to keep up that Brazilian part of my life. So that's appealing to me to date. And Brazilian women are beautiful, notoriously. So it helps. But I guess maybe I'm just like my father. And maybe we'll go down the same paths, and you do the same things again and again. That's what this book's about. You always just do what your parents and grandparents did, and nothing changes. I well, I don't have to prove it, so yeah, I'm a great dancer. Great dancer, great cook. Oh, the food is, I think the food's delicious, right? It's a lot of meat. Like, have you guys ever been to a Brazilian steakhouse? Like, they got they got that fogo de chão, right? Which is a popular, I don't know if it's out here yet, but the steak is really like, I think the main part. If you like meat, if you like red meat, you'll love Brazilian food. They got this, it's rice and beans is a big part of it too. They got this bean stew, it's this feijoada. Are there any Brazilian restaurants in Wheeling? No? There should be. It's delicious. No, in Steubenville. Maybe I got to open one. That'll be another job for me. That's my grandma. That's my grandma. Yeah, it's a real live Brazilian. Okay, enough from my family. A stand-up routine. Well, I've been standing up and making you laugh, haven't I? I think that's good enough. But are you guys watching the Olympics? Yes. Okay. Rooting for the United States. Yeah. Okay. See, that's where I'm like I root for uh, United States or Brazil, depending on who's better at it. So, and most of I'm rooting for the U.S. basketball team on that. If it's soccer, I root for Brazil. So that's good. I can always pick a winner. So my father still lives in Steubenville. Yes, he does. Yes, he does. That's why I come. I come to visit frequently. You know. Mm. Yeah. 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 Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, well, that's good. So you're saying if I fail, it'll all be okay. No, no, no. Yeah, then I can open the restaurant. Well, yeah, it is there's it's a different life in New York trying to, do something creative especially. But I mean, I feel like you should be happy where you are. I mean, if you're going to New York and the only thing that's going to make me happy is being a star, right? And then, you're probably going to be unhappy there, and you're going to be unhappy when you come back, right? I'm enjoying the grind. If it doesn't work out, maybe I will move back to Steubenville and open that restaurant, and it'll all be good, But that's a good question. I mean, uh, what is good about living in the United States and going to Brazil is being paid in American dollars. It's worth a lot more down there than vice versa. So, I mean, if I store up enough American dollars, maybe I'll go down there. But, huh? It's worth like 5-1 to Brazilian. So, I mean, if you guys, go to Brazil, spend some money, you'll get your buck's worth down there. Yeah, this is this is paid for by the Brazilian tourism, Yeah. I think the problem is that there was this gigantic corruption scandal it probably broke, it's about 10 years old now, but the government was like meddling with these oil companies, and basically they just stole a whole bunch of money, right? So the money's money's a big problem everywhere. Like Rio has been bankrupt several times as a city, right? And so when the government doesn't have any money and people are unhappy with what the government is doing, it's a bottom, top-down unrest, right? And so it just causes political chaos. So there's a little bit of political chaos right now. And I mean, our president now, Lula, was in jail, and then he became the president, so, maybe, the United States is following the Brazilian route now, so. But see, our cultures, it's the same, it's the same. Yeah, for sure. That's I mean, it's like Rio in a lot of ways, and Rio's a big city like New York in a lot of ways, and Steubenville is, you guys know what Steubenville's like. I like the city vibe. I like the democratic nature of a city in which everyone's on the street, right, and you're rubbing shoulders with all kinds of people from a class way different sorts of billionaire, right? I mean, when I'm training boxers, right, I'm training sometimes people with hundreds of millions of dollars, and then poor kids that I train for free. And I just like being around all the various types of humanity. I think that's instructive in some ways, just, to your attitude. Yeah, true. Yeah, 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 yeah. I think it. I mean, it depends on the person, but I like that aspect of New York. The Yeah, thanks.
Any more questions? We're going to let Harold off the hook now. And I think he's going to be a famous writer someday, and he'll remember this, and he'll come and see us every year when he has a new book out.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Harold.
Thanks.